everybody, welcome back to Misericorde. The last time we left off, Hedwig and the others were in the Misericorde having a merry time. Anyway, without further ado, let's just get right into today's episode. The energy of the night decayed slowly but surely. There had been a steady rotation of sisters between chess games and dancing, but the games of chess were now much less raucous. The dancers, myself included, were now sitting down, and Margaret was the last musician still playing a tune. She stood by the crackling fire, staring into the flames and plucking out a bittersweet tune. Her fingers moved delicately over the strings. The intensity with which she stared into the fireplace gave the impression that she was serenading the flames themselves. That's a really lovely tune. What is it? Thank you. I don't know, really. It's my own. I don't have a name for it. Oh. Well, it's beautiful. She turned away from the fireplace and flashed one of her sad smiles at me. I sometimes wonder if I ever had a single earnest exchange while I was outside of this cell. You and I, as we are here, this is as honest as it can get for me. I am free from reinterpreting what flickers across your face as your true intent. Speaking face to face is like reading a book with words that rearrange themselves. Aren't you going to ask me what it's about? What's about? The song. It doesn't have words, so what could it possibly be about? Margaret smiled again. It still didn't come across as happy exactly, but there was some warmth in her face this time. Of course. How silly of me. I don't understand. I'm the one who doesn't understand. I keep asking you these questions as if you were anyone else. Am I so different compared to these women? She tilted her head towards the others who were all preoccupied in quiet conversations of their own. Very. None of them see the world quite like you do. That makes me sound a little too important. I didn't say you were better than them. And for that matter, I don't think they're better than you. Everyone here is just different. And you're different in a very interesting way. You speak the same language, but sometimes I feel like I barely understand anyone. Or that nobody understands you. I felt the same way. And I've often wondered, is the onus to change on you or them? Me. That was a quick answer. Well, why should it be anyone else's responsibility? Very noble. But by the same token, why should it be yours? Because I'm new. And I'm more out of place than they are. But when you think about it, the world is the world only because of the people that came before it. That they set the standard for it. But you, it doesn't have to be right. It doesn't mean that the world or traditions are right. And you, as this newcomer, doesn't mean you have to assimilate to that old culture. Sometimes they need a change too. And maybe you can be that change. There are more of you than me, if that makes sense. More people who have lived in their lives outside of little rooms. I couldn't possibly demand everyone else start making concessions for me. That's very interesting. When I asked you what the song meant, what was your first reaction? Inside, in your mind before you spoke. I thought, how can a song with no words mean anything? My response was earnest, I assure you. You are very honest. Does the music make you feel something, though? It's very sad compared to what you were all playing before. You can tell? That's wonderful. But still, your question is perfectly valid. There are no words, so how could it have any meaning? I came up with this tune when I was feeling rather melancholy. I think the notes match. These notes sound sad to me. I have no idea how I would know that, and even less of an idea of how you might know it. Anyway, it was silly of me to ask, but it does seem like deep down you understood me. That's fascinating, but I don't understand a word of it. She chuckled. This is the sort of thing me and Katherine used to talk about. Thank you, Hedwig. Is it really? Yes. I must admit, I'm cribbing from her work a little here. She asked me these questions almost exactly once upon a time when I was new. I told her about how when I was a little girl, it was the hymns that kept me interested in mass, or is it mass? Well, I couldn't really find anything online, but here we call it mass, so they're gonna bear with me. Despite not knowing what any of the lyrics meant, she laughed and said that was proof that God was in the music itself. I didn't understand what she meant at the time. I didn't agree. I might still have some complicated thoughts about all of it. Maybe she was also forced into sisterhood. But whenever I play music, I think about that. I miss her laugh. Oh no. I just can't really bring myself to doubt anyone because they all seem to really miss Katherine. Katherine is second anyway. And I think it's most obvious with Darcy, Eustace, and, well, Margaret here now. And Moira. She began to pluck a new tune on her instrument. Ooh. That was one of hers. Katherine's? What I can remember of it, anyway. I wish I could recall the whole thing. I had no idea how to respond to this and endeavored to move past the evidently raw subject. One forlorn drunkard had been enough for me. Unfortunately, I managed to put my foot in my mouth instead. Margaret, you're from far away, yes? Here we go. Go on. And I may as well be from someplace far away. Are we similar in that regard? Do we have a sort of kinship as outsiders? I lived my whole life in England, Hedwig. As did my father. As did his father. And his mother, for that matter. So, no. Not particularly. She continued to strum her lute, but I could feel a sucking void in between each note. I'm sorry. The superior well, at that luncheon, I must have misinterpreted. She smiled thinly, with none of the subtle humor her vexatious expressions often betrayed. I could sense that I have tested her patience. The superior has never once asked me about my life. Keep that in mind in case she's told you anything else about me. I must have looked a right fool as I gawped at her and tried to think of something to say. But just then, Hedwig. Flora. The sudden intrusion made me jump. I turned around, but I couldn't see where Flora was. Down here. Flora was sprawled out on a stone floor. Is she wasted? Her head so close to my foot that I might have tripped had I taken a step to the side. What are you doing on the floor? Convalescing? I feel sick when I stand up, but down here is good. That makes sense. Are you alright? Yes, this is normal. I think. Katherine said this is normal. I glanced across the room to Katherine, who was sitting at the table looking only slightly more conscious than Flora. If I lay down for long enough, I will feel normal again. And then I can have some more wine. Oh, I think there's plenty left. That's a rather big cask. I bet I could fit in it if I drank the rest of what's in there. But I'd go steady now if I were you. Shh. I need to ask Hedwig a question. What do you need, Flora? Well, you used to make all those Bibles, yeah? And you know how to make pictures? Do you mean illuminating? Yes, that's what I said. Illuminating. Yes, Flora. I did a little illuminating. So. 2 ideas. I have 2 ideas for you. Go on then. I can't wait to hear this. Idea number 1. Where is all the gold from that? The gold? The gold from the enumerating. Keep up. You mean a leaf? The gold leaf? Illuminating manuscripts involves a lot of colorful pigments, including gold leaf. I always enjoyed filling in little details like hollows and jewelry with my little brush. I must admit, though, that it wasn't my favorite color to work with. I was partial to the deep blue pigment I broke out for depictions of certain ropes, eyes, and the ocean. Right, where do we keep all that? I'm not sure. It would get brought to me little pots every few months. I think the bishop brought them. Fuck! It's not here? I could feel myself turning hot with embarrassment and shock. Now I'm actually intrigued by a little history lesson. When was the word fuck coined? Flora's drunken demeanor was already knocking me off keel, and her vulgar outburst set my teeth on edge. I don't think so. Sorry, Flora. Did you want to paint with it? No, I wanted. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. I wanted to steal it! Oh. Think about it. We could be rich. And we could have split it in half and half. 3 ways. I'd want in on this deal too. Fuck! Fair is fair, I suppose. That's... Flora, how could you? Hedwig, I don't think you need to take this very seriously. Plotting to rob the Abbey, or worse, the... Eosis itself, this is very serious. You're no fun. It's paint, Flora. What Hedwig means is that the gold isn't worth anything when it's paint. Oh. I knew it was too good to be true. Tough luck. What will you even do with all that gold? If it was really gold, I mean. What do you think? Us 3, we get out of this flipping abbey. Go someplace far away. She gestured broadly with her hand, I presume to imitate a bird or the wind or something. Ah, bless her. Why would we want to do that? Because I hate it here. Tears started welling up in her eyes. I had no idea what to say. Flora, let's get you up. Come on. She extended a hand down to Flora. I followed suit, although I'm not sure I was much help. We dragged the poor girl to her feet and brought her to one of the chairs by the fireplace. Look at Flora. She looked positively sodden. I hate it here so much. There. Surely you don't mean that. Margaret shot me a look, and for the first time, I could sense true venom behind her eyes. I would think so too. Everyone here hates being in the Abbey, maybe except for Angela and Hedwig, but I can't really fault Hedwig for not knowing how to read the social cues of the situation. She hasn't been in contact with, well, a lot of people. It was the briefest flash of anger, but it was enough to make me feel like a flower looking up at a boot. Why do you hate it here, Flora? There's nothing to do, and I'm all alone. Margaret reached out and clasped her shoulder. You aren't alone, but I understand. I am, though. There's no one my age here. Nobody talks to me. I don't know what I'm doing here. I never wanted to join a convent. She broke down into little hiccuping sobs. Margaret got down on one knee and squeezed Flora's hand in hers. I was too much of a coward to follow suit. All I could do was stand there stupidly, hoping that some of the immense pity I was feeling would be detectable to Flora and Margaret. I wanted to help, but I had not a single earthly idea of what help looked like. You never had a choice, did you, Flora? What did she do? Flora shook her head. I miss Katherine. I do too. She would talk to me. She was you lot's age, but at least she knew how to listen. She was the only one who felt like a real sister to me. I opened my mouth to point out that sister was merely a title, but thought better of it. Good. Katherine made time for everyone. I'm sorry if it feels like we haven't made any time for you, Flora. I can try harder. But I like being alone. She started sobbing again. I was bewildered by this contradiction, but Margaret just smiled. I do understand. I really do. Us old foggies aren't much fun to be around, are we? Flora shook her head and Margaret chuckled. We're all you have, I'm afraid. Not if I leave. You can't leave, Flora. None of us can. Our vows are perpetual. They don't have to be. I mean, Hedwig. She pointed at me weakly. Hedwig broke hers and she was an anchoress or what have you. That was different, Flora. How? I had an answer for this, but I could not share it. Instead, I had to stew in the uncomfortable silence between the three of us. I'm certain that's a more complicated situation, Flora. Well, maybe I could be complicated. I would be happy telling people it was complicated if they asked how I could leave. There's always other convents you could transfer to one day. You could go to London or Spain. I'm sure they have a lot more nuns your age in abbeys that aren't in the middle of nowhere like our boring old place. Remember when Katherine and you were planning a visit to Italy? Yeah. Maybe we can try and put something like that together again for you. I just hate to see you break your vows and throw your life away. If you break your vows, what happens? Would that be so bad? Yes. The two of them turned to look at me inquisitively. A trace of the same rage I had sensed earlier flickered behind Margaret's eyes, but I forged onward. Come on, Hedwig. Take it from me, Flora. Don't break your vows. Your life might feel difficult sometimes, but those struggles are nothing compared to the regret you would feel breaking that oath. If the guilt didn't consume you, the world would. The world. No man would marry you. No lord would want your service. You would have nowhere to go but back to the church. And then you would be right back where you started, feeling all the same things with the added yoke of despair that no matter how hard you threw yourself into the work, no matter how much you believed in your vows this time, that you had made that choice, that you were once an apostate, as a milestone you could never take off. Flora looked ready to burst into tears again. Margaret had cast her eyes onto the floor. How would you know? Because this is how I feel every day, Flora. Sister Margaret is right. My choice was complicated. But I've regretted it every day since, and I will for every waking moment of my life. You don't want to end up like me. Hedwig is right, Flora. Leaving this life can be very tempting, but there's really nowhere else to go. I don't know if that makes me feel any better. I promise I will do whatever I can to make you feel more at home here. Hedwig will too. Won't you, Hedwig? Yes, of course. Thank you. Oh man, poor Flora. She sniffled and pulled her hand away from Margaret's. She twiddled her thumbs together in her lap and feebly attempted a smile. I guess it's just a wine. I mean, where would I go? You can still travel the world if you really want to. There's no reason we can't ask the superior to send you somewhere nice one day. We just don't want you to throw your life away. Believe me, everyone in this room has been where you are right now. Really? When I was your age, I once tried to escape in the back of the delivery cart. I was going to hop off in the village and get a boat across the lake. From there, I'd hitchhike to London, marry a wealthy man, maybe a visiting dignitary or something of the sort. I had big ideas. Why didn't you? Margaret grinned. Her eyes were slightly glassy. Oh no. Katherine had more or less the same conversation with me that we're having with you right now. She begged me to stay. She asked what she could do to convince me. And, well, that's when I said I wanted to play the lute. We all remained silent for a moment. Flora, forgive me, but earlier you have said you had 2 ideas. Is there something someone could do? Oh, that. No, it was nothing. Go on. Tell us. Well, I was gonna ask if you could teach me what you know about illumination, Hedwig. After all, I'd need some skills if I were ever to leave, wouldn't I? Oh wow, she really thought this through. You wanted to steal a bunch of gold paint to fund your life on a run as an artist? Margaret started to giggle. Flora looked affronted at first, but eventually joined in with a quiet chuckle of her own. Shove off. No, I like it. It's better than my plan was. Well, I'm rubbish at drawing, so a bit of a non-starter. Hedwig will teach you. Won't you, Hedwig? Margaret's tone was light, but she was looking at me with a grim intensity. Of course I will. I can't promise much. I've only ever worked on illuminated Bibles before, but just the basics. That's all I need. That's right, it's good to start somewhere. Katherine taught me about music, and she wasn't exactly Hildegard. Flora stood up from a chair. She was wobbly on her feet, a reminder that she was still very, very drunk. As she lurched towards me, she threw her arms around me unannounced, marking the second time this evening that I had no idea how to respond to somebody's touch. Thanks, Hedwig. You're alright. You know that? Give the lady some space, Flora. He probably doesn't want to smell your wine breath. Why don't you go eat something? Flora released me from an embrace and gave Margaret a vaguely affirmative hand gesture. She spun around on her heel, still a little unbalanced, and wandered off towards the table. Goodness, I haven't seen anyone get that pissed in a while. Did I say something wrong? You said many things wrong, Hedwig. I don't think so. I think we did the best we could. Well, that's nice of Margaret to say that, but sometimes I wish that Hedwig knew a little bit more of how to hold her tongue back. But at the same time, like I said before, I think it's just hard for Hedwig to do so considering she has led a life of solitude. Do you mean it? Mean what? About breaking your vows? Do you really feel that way? Oh, yes. There was no sense in walking things backward. Why did you do it then? In retrospect, I probably would not have made the same decision. That's why I felt it was worth telling Flora. Margaret nodded thoughtfully. Well, lovely chatting with you. She picked up her lute from a chair next to the one Flora had been sitting in, and then left to put it back on the shelf. Crumbs, what's gotten into Flora? Katherine had wandered over to our side of the Misericorde, nursing a drink in one hand and resting the other on her hip. I think she just had a little too much to drink. Too right. I heard her bawling over here and thought to stay out of it, but now she's at the table yammering on and on about cats. How are you faring? Me? I'm, having fun. To a degree. We've been consoling Flora. It worked. She's back to being quite irritating. Well, you can thank Hedwig. She's the expert. Ooh, did you impart some of your anchor's wisdom? Yes, I suppose I did. It was tough, but it was what Flora needed to hear. Marvelous. I still remember visiting your odd little window and asking all about something or other. You were quite a blunt instrument, if I recall. Was I? I once came to the window to ask what the punishment for breaking a promise was. You were prepared with a whole lecture about how I shouldn't be taking any oaths in the first place, with several citations from Matthew on hand, of course. I'm afraid I don't remember that. It was years and years ago. That doesn't surprise me. Do you remember many of our questions? Do you know who asked what? I remember questions, but not who asked them, and I wouldn't tell anyone if I did. Good. I mean, not why I was asking, but good. Oh, why were you asking? So, how was your first thingy? She dodged the question. Oh, it's been fun. Don't worry about Flora. Someone always cries at one of these. Sometimes more than one person. Oh no, it's her, more often than not. Me? Me crying? Absolutely untrue. I have a reputation to maintain. A day let's flip the table over. Someone started getting weepy. I'd say you're getting about as rigorous an education in Misericorde etiquette as you possibly could have. It's certainly been a learning experience. Oh, but it's been fun, right? We're having fun. Katherine was just as wine-addled as Flora had been, but it was clearly affecting her differently. Flora had almost seemed like a different girl. Katherine was simply multiplied. Whatever clarity she had been experiencing when we chatted by the fire earlier had been enhanced with a slightly manic energy. I'm having fun. Yes, absolutely. Good. Because you know the superior would have me hanged if you didn't have a good time. Really? She put you up to this? Oh, good heavens, no. I can just intuit these things. You know? I can just see her bearing down on me because you complained. I don't complain to the superior. That's good. I mean, not that you have anything to complain about. Sorry, I wasn't insinuating that you would complain, just that... By the way, actually, did you know that cow Angela complained about me to her once? To get back at me for... I forgot where I was going with this. You were going to sit down and take it easy, I think. Yes. Thank you, Margaret. Yes, I was. I could sense that my window was closing. Katherine was a very different kind of drunk than Flora, but it seemed like she, too, was not far from falling to the floor. Actually, Margaret, could you give us a minute? Of course. She looked a little confused, but she obliged. Love her. Very clever. Isn't she just? Margaret's wonderful. Katherine, I've been meaning to ask you something, and it's very important. If it's about Kat, it isn't mine. No, it's not about the cat. And I need to get Eustace or one of the other crafty ones to help me with my door. Sorry if it bothers you. Does the door bother you? No, it was now or never. James. I spoke to James. He says you can vouch for him about the night Katherine II died. Can you? Is that true? Katherine's brow furrowed slowly, and her eyes adjusted in a strange and unexpected manner. It was like I had forcibly snuck the wine out of her somehow. Was she just acting, or perhaps she has sobered up? You spoke to James. What did he say? Not much at all. He professed his innocence, though, and I don't know. Just coming out to Katherine and saying this just puts her in a very odd position. Well, puts Hedwig in a position where she has now confessed that she has spoken to the accused, and Katherine's probably gonna be on guard around her, if Katherine has something to do with it. He professed his innocence, though, and He said you might be able to prove it. Something to do with his traveling cloak? What traveling cloak? The one Darcy found. I was speaking in a whisper lower than I had known I was capable of. I was terrified that someone might overhear, but there was no turning back now. Not here. We can't talk about this here. Not with everyone else around. Then when? And where? Everyone turned to look at the door in unison. Are we expecting something? Perhaps Sister Darcy has brought some more food? Moira, who had been sitting closest to the door, stood up to answer it first. She removed a bolt, swung open a door, and I'm getting scared. Oh no! Oh! Moira fell onto her backside and scrambled away from the door on all fours. Everyone else screamed and wailed as soon as they saw what was at the door. Oh man, I am terrified. The same hulking figure that had threatened me at the end of the hallway all those nights ago. Oh, what? No, is this a dream? The cloaked figure lumbered forward, its metal boots thudding against the stone floor. Everyone had made for the back of the room as fast as they could, all yelling at the top of their lungs. I myself felt absolutely petrified, but I could not bring myself to move. I just stood there, assuredly white as a sheet, unable to move. I felt like my heart would give up if I took even one step. The monster took another labored step towards me. I hope they don't show it because I am pretty terrified right now. I stood there, dumbstruck, as it brought itself before me. The gauntleted hand reached under its cloak, and with a horrible grinding shriek, it drew its sword. Everyone screamed again. They were practically baying. Oh, that is scary. Cease your feeble inquiries, Sister Hedwig. Oh no, I'm not looking forward to this. I am not afraid of you. What? She's not. I am. I'm terrified. Could you believe that this was not a lie? Faced with a sword, I felt an odd sense of peace. More importantly, who is this thing that is asking questions? The glint of the blade in the candlelight, it offered me a noble release from the predicament I found myself in. Do not force my hand. Cease! Did you not hear me? I am not afraid. Then you truly are a fool. Strike me down then. I would gladly die in service to the Lord. I would gladly give myself in defense of what is right and just. If you would have me killed for pursuing the truth, then so be it. I could practically hear everyone's head tilting in confusion at once. A musical chord of rustling fabric. What? I grow tired of this conversation. Consider this a warning. Still pointing their sword at me, the figure took a lurching step backwards, only to trip on its own cloak. Do you think perhaps this is not a creepy figure, but I don't know, maybe Darcy? Oh, that is scary. Who is this? It's a sister, that's for sure, is it not? The women who had been huddled behind me rushed forward. Maybe it's Angela. Adela grabbed the sword that had fallen out of my assailant's hand and held it at their neck. Wait, no. The only one with a sword really reasonably would be Eustace. Adela, stop. Remove your disguise, cur, before I cut your head off and remove it myself. The cloaked figure held up their hands defensively. Their hands looked far too small for the bulky gauntlets they wore. I glanced down at their legs and was shocked to see that they were twisted and broken. Your legs? Are you alright? Man, she has some empathy. Oh yes, let's make sure this creep's legs are unharmed. Stop. My legs are alright. The voice sounded less ragged and imposing now. The figure shifted their weight, and I realized that the big metal boots they had been wearing had simply come off in a tumble. With a sense of resignation, the monster lifted its hands to the black cloth mask, concealing its face, and... Eustace. I knew it! It's Eustace! The prize. I knew it, but... why? So was it Eustace all this time? Oh no, I don't like this sound. But at the same time, if it was Eustace, where did she get the goat? Oh, this is kind of becoming kind of odd and confusing. Eustace, it was you? Yes. Wait a minute. So you're telling me Hedwig's ghost prank was actually your prank? That's right. Eustace winced as she pulled herself to her feet. My most elaborate ever. She has the face of someone who has pulled off a very successful prank. I know you enjoy tormenting people with your practical jokes, but this was a bit much. Hang on. I don't enjoy tormenting people. That was terrifying. I was so confused. I was dumbfounded. Part of me was relieved to discover that the ghost I had been seeing was not a ghost at all, but the other part of me was feeling something indescribable towards Eustace. Eustace? Why? Well, that's a good question. Mostly because I thought it would be funny. Rather a large miscalculation there, I'm afraid. You thought it was funny the first time. I thought it was funny when I thought this character was something Hedwig made up. Now that I know you actually went and dressed up like a nasty devil and scared her, and now all of us witless, I'm reevaluating. So was Hedwig right when she told us? Did you really kill a goat? Eustace looked at me with a cold but clearly wounded expression. No, maybe Hedwig imagined the goat. I think perhaps Hedwig was so overcome with shock that she saw something in the shadows that wasn't there. Entirely reasonable, I should think. You were waving a flaming sword around according to her description. That's the point. No fire this time? Or did Hedwig imagine that too? It seemed like a waste of oil. Not to mention, it's not good for the blade. Eustace beckoned for Adela to pass her the sword back. Are you sure you want to pass Eustace the sword back? Adela's eyes narrowed. Absolutely not. Oh, Adela, you are so smart, and I am trusting you in my life, but at the same time, I'm kind of scared of you too. Come on. I'm the sacrist. I've got to put it back. I do not think this is behavior befitting a sacrist. And disrespecting Sister Katherine's sword in this manner. Oh man. Shameful. We should tell the superior about this. I honestly think so too. You're overreacting slightly, I think. I disagree. Katherine's sword? I was so angry that I couldn't help but blurt this thought out as soon as it entered my head. Did you not know this, Sister Hedwig? I scrambled to say something that would allay any suspicions. I spoke to Angela about what happened to Katherine, and she said it was the delivery man's sword. Angela thinks she is smarter than she is. Although why she would try to deceive you about that, I have no idea. Oh man, pinning the blame on Angela now is a bit bad. So it really was Katherine's? Well, it certainly wasn't the delivery boy's, so Katherine was slain by her own sword. No, I think there is something going on about that. Do you know how much a sword costs? Especially one of that size. So, how on earth was it Katherine's? It wasn't actually hers. She just liked to borrow it from the library. And you let her? I refuse to be questioned on this by someone who barely knows me and who didn't know her at all. You are not in a position to act superior to anyone right now, Eustace. I don't know if we need to tell Soup, but that was not on Eustace. Margaret, I know for a fact you and Katherine used to plan and execute far worse. Oh, innocent. Katherine the second. I think you should calm down, Eustace. I'm sorry we didn't find this prank particularly amusing. You threatened to kill poor Hedwig. I pretended to threaten her. No, I do not buy this. She was awfully... How do I say this? She was kind of... angry with us before we entered the Misericorde. Oh well, in that case... Remind me, Margaret, what happened to the Superior before ours? That was nothing like this, and you know it. Yes, it was significantly worse. What are you talking about? Nothing. What did Margaret and Katherine II do? It was before your time. And before Eustace, for that matter. So she should keep it out of her mouth. I heard enough about it. Straight from you and her. Stop making this about me. This is about you and your stupid ghost costume. Waving a sword in Hedwig's face. Honestly, how could you? It beggars belief that you attempt to flip this around on anyone else. Eustace looked around the room, but nobody offered any support. She was breathing heavily and looked as if she was about to cry. Once she was certain nobody was coming to her rescue, she focused on me. Hedwig... Oh no! She slapped her? I mean, well, would I say that warranted a slap? I don't know. But was it within Hedwig's right to slap her? I mean, I guess she did get threatened, and she, well, could have died, honestly. It wasn't a good prank, honestly, so... I don't know. That was pretty bad of Eustace, but... Well, who slapped Eustace to begin with? Oh, Hedwig. I had struck her so hard my hand stung. I mean, Hedwig must have been extremely terrified, and not just that, but this thought probably plagued her for days, nights, maybe. Eustace's face was redder than the evening's wine. I realized that I must have scraped her face with my fingernails during the swipe, as there was just a touch of blood on her cheek. I half expected her eyes to start welling up with tears, but she just stood there. Perhaps she was dumbstruck. You are cruel, Eustace. Cruel and nasty. Do you enjoy making me feel small? Hedwig. I instinctively raised my hand again, although this time I was held back by several of the women behind me. Easy now. Have you ever said anything earnest to me, Eustace? Have you spoken to me truthfully even once? Of course I have. How can I trust you? Ever. I tried futilely to lunge at her again, but I was not strong enough to overcome the several people gripping my arm and shoulders. I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand why Eustace would try to prank Hedwig. I think there's something going on that we really don't know about. I don't like you. That is... there. Man, I don't understand. Let's all calm down now, yeah? Yes, I think that's quite enough theater for the night. What's going on? Tonight's outing to the Misericorde has concluded, I think. Boo! Blame Eustace, I suppose. It is getting quite late, though. I'll be getting on. She slunk away from the group and out the door too quickly for me to object. The other women who had been holding on to me finally loosened their grips. All except for Moira, who patted me on the shoulder consolingly. Oh, this is gonna make chronicling very tense now, considering they share the same space. Let's get you to bed, Hedwig. I nodded, but I kept looking at Eustace. She looked pathetic. She was not openly crying, but I swear I heard a sniffle as Moira piloted me past her and out of the room. The others were following suit, muttering to each other in quiet conversation. Once we were out in the hallway, I realized just how stuffy and airless the Misericorde had felt. I took in a breath of fresh air and felt a slight pang of regret, enough to make me turn around to see if Eustace had left the room. Moira tucked me away quickly. Okay, but before I forget... Well, Eustace, we really need to revisit what Eustace said to Hedwig because it seemed very much in that context that she knows what Hedwig is asking about and she wants to put an end to it. And if she was never caught, then she would never have owned up to it and would probably keep terrorizing Hedwig for the rest of her time in the Abbey. I don't know. I think someone might have set Eustace up there. Hard to say. We shall have to wait for more information, more evidence. Moira tucked me away quickly. I think that's enough for tonight. I don't know. I think I should apologize. Well, you can do that tomorrow. Right now, what I think you need is some rest. I hit her quite hard. As well, you should have, if I'm being frank. What a horrible practical joke. There was a slight twinkling sound as her foot collided with the empty tincture bottle I had left on my bed earlier. Oops, sorry. Oh, no, it's my fault. It must have fallen off the bed. What was in it? She shut the door behind her and sat me down on my bed, just like she had on my first day out of my cell. Nothing, not anymore at least. It was something Darcy gave me earlier. Hee. Best to be careful drinking anything Darcy gives you. It was actually rather helpful. She said it would give me confidence. Well, we'll have to tell her it was a rousing success, won't we? We both chuckled. What a day, Yes, quite a day. I smiled weakly at her for a moment, but I couldn't maintain the charade for long. I burst into tears. Moira made a sympathetic cooing sound and put her hands on my shoulders. I shrugged them off quickly. I'd had enough of people attempting to restrain me for one night. Instead, she offered the front of a robe for me to dry my eyes on, which I did accept. Moira is really kind. There. I think this was all a bit much for you in one go, perhaps. Is it always like this? It feels like the whole Abbey just fell apart. And it's all my fault. Well, this definitely wasn't one of our better nights, but... No, I can think of worse. Really? Don't forget someone died not too long ago. I think that might still top you having a little too much drink, don't you? Oh, silly me. Hehe. But even so, we have some colorful personalities here. It's not the first time we had a minor clash. But I hit her. I had no idea I was even capable. I'm a freak. I should have never left my cell. Aw, poor Hedwig. Marta's stronger than she looks, you know. She's clapped Flora on the cheek more times than I can count. Marta definitely seems a bit... suspicious maybe? Or, well, she has her really bad sides too. And I'm sure she'll smack Adela one of these days if they keep arguing about the sherry. Oh, and well, I think Darcy's gotten into it with Katherine before. Really, Darcy and Katherine, I can't see it. Although that might just have been under the influence of a particularly bad mushroom. That doesn't count. They were high. They were definitely high. The details are different, but I'll be honest with you. I think people mostly remembering the boiling over, not what was in the pot. Still, would you believe that I've gotten slept a few times? What? Why? She chuckled again and leaned down to give me a kiss on the forehead. My, that's sweet. So condescending. Oh! Hedwig doesn't like it. Oh my. Trouble is brewing, that's for sure. No, I'm happy to gossip, but I think I have the right to withhold gossip about myself. Wouldn't you agree? I suppose that makes sense. Hehe. You can ask Eustace about it, I'm sure. Maybe that's a good way to start mending the bridge. Or you could ask Angela. I'm sure she'd have a particularly dramatic version to share. I groaned into her robe. Oh dear. I have to work with Eustace. We all have to work together, Hedwig. How? I'm in the same room. It's going to be horrible. You'll find a way. We always do. She gently tugged her robe away from me. There was an embarrassingly soggy patch on her chest, visible even on the black fabric in the dim moonlight. "I'll see you at service tomorrow?" "Of course." "Good. Get some sleep. You'll feel better in the morning. I promise." She made to leave. When she opened the door, I could hear Angela commenting to her from the landing. "It would seem I left just before things got interesting." "Yes, well, there's always next time." She shut the door behind her and their conversation became too muffled to focus on. I collapsed onto the bed, spread-eagled, and then half-heartedly attempted to get into it properly. I stared at the ceiling, unsure what to do. It was late, but there was absolutely no chance I was going to fall asleep anytime soon. Something felt wrong inside me. Yeah, like calling Moira condescending? I don't know. Despite Moira's assurances that things would continue as usual, I felt as if I had just stepped across a threshold as dramatic as the one I had crossed when I left my cell. Eustace's cruel joke had thrown so much of the past few weeks into question, but nonetheless I felt a bit ill. I rubbed the hand that I had struck her cheek with. I could still feel the sting lingering. She had terrified me, not just me, but the entire room full of women. For what? All in the service of some hazing ritual? The superior had warned everyone about that. I realized that she would have only mentioned it if it had been a problem prior. Perhaps this was typical. Perhaps I was unaccustomed to the space I now occupied, unprepared for how adversarial and mean-spirited it was. And it was. There was no denying that over the past few weeks. Okay, so it has been a few weeks. And tonight especially, I had observed a community on the rocks. It wasn't just Eustace and I. It was Angela and Katherine, Adela and Charity, Flora and, well, everyone else. Those weren't the only conflicts either. All in all, it seemed that this place was a kind of nexus of misery and resentment. I was restless. Sighing deeply, I got off the bed and quietly crept to my door. Where's she going? There was no conversation emanating from any of the rooms or the hallway. It seemed as if everyone had succeeded where I could not. I did my best to stay silent as I collected a briquette from the mantel and lit the candle in the fireplace and headed out for a stroll. Wait, but still, it wouldn't explain the figure that was crossing the cloister at night. Could it be Eustace? I don't know. It was quite cold out now. I thank God for my cozy robes. The thick woolen fabric did an admirable job of protecting me from the elements, and I could ball up the extra fabric of my oversized sleeve to keep my free hand warm. I wandered back and forth across the landing a few times. I was a lot more confident spending time alone outside now that Eustace had outed herself as my mysterious stalker. I descended the stairs nearest the dorm and did a few slow laps of the cloister, deep in thought. You know what? I'm kinda scared. I'm scared that something will happen. Should I tell the superior? I felt uneasy about this. Margaret and a few others had seemed to balk at Adela's idea of involving her. Then again, I would have to report to her sooner or later, and it would be hard to pretend nothing had happened. Especially since I had not even gotten the answer from Katherine that I had promised to make my priority. Oh well, it had not been for lack of trying. Perhaps I could corner Katherine before service tomorrow. She hadn't seemed unwilling to talk at all, just unwilling to do it in the company of others, which I could understand. On the other hand, what if Eustace had handed me the evidence I needed anyway? Who else could have beheaded someone but the woman with access to the sword? How cavalier Eustace had been with the threats too. Oh, this is not in front, right? This is not in front of me, right? This is just her recalling what she said? Cease your meddling. In retrospect, okay, thank goodness. Eustace's attempt at a booming, authoritative voice had been a little unconvincing. I had been swept up in a moment, I suppose. Nonetheless, her threats seemed quite targeted. Yes, now that we are a lot more clear-headed, I do think that her threats seem to target, well, Hedwig? It was not the first time Eustace had advised me to keep my nose clean. I took a turn out of the cloister and into the paths between mostly unused rooms and buildings the superior had led me past on the way to the hospitalum. The brisk night air was doing something helpful for my thoughts, at the very least, and I wanted to stretch my legs further. Eustace controlled access to the sword, there was no doubt about that. And let's not forget, I think Superior also has the key to the room, I think, if I'm not wrong. Thinking more on the situation, was there really any other reason needed to finger her as the perpetrator? Katherine had been beheaded, and the wretched tool had been left in the cloister as an ill omen. I had no idea why Eustace would want to kill Katherine, but was that my responsibility to find out? I had been charged with finding Katherine's killer. Katherine had been killed with a sword. Has she been killed with a sword? We don't know. The one sword in the abbey resided under lock and key. A key that Eustace controlled. And let's not forget, though, that the key that Eustace has can always be stolen by someone else. What else was there to it? As I wandered the path towards the outer wall of the abbey, I became surer and surer of this line of reasoning, and I became less convinced. Why did the why matter? I was not here to judge. I thought about Flora. If Eustace was found guilty and handed over to the diocese, maybe the clouds surrounding the abbey would part. Maybe she could be happy. I thought about Katherine. Something was weighing on her, and it was clearly something to do with the night of Katherine II's death. Had she seen something? Was she simply too afraid to speak? What if all of them are involved? Oh man. She certainly left in a hurry after Eustace's little stunt backfired. This too might be resolved if Eustace was found to be the guilty one. I reached the end of the courtyard and stood in the shadow of the crumbling outer wall. No, I'm kind of getting scared. Goodness, they really should have built a gate here. Anyone could come into the abbey from this direction if they braved the hill and the cold. Right, the hill. Remember the thing you found, Hedwig? This big clue. It doesn't have to be any of the sisters if Katherine was killed by someone. Someone could have snuck in through the night, or someone has already been living in the abbey. The abbey is so big after all. It could have been anyone. And yet, the longer I turned things over in my head, the more I thought about the ghost stories people had told earlier in the evening. The cloud of negativity. Maybe it really was a haunting. Eustace had been dressing up as my ghost, but what about Flora's? Adela's? Was every ghost story here a tale born of Eustace's mean streak? I don't think so. I found that hard to believe as much as that astounded me. Demons and devils, they infested this place. I saw a light in the distance. My heart dropped out of my chest. No, I'm so terrified right now. Oh God. I scrambled through the open archway in the wall, desperate to see what was out there on the moorland this late at night. Oh God, I'm scared. The rolling hillocks made it difficult to get a good look from my position. We are on the east hill. I did my best to quietly hop and sprint forward, keeping myself in as high a position in the rolling field as I could. The light ahead of me kept dipping out of sight. Is someone coming up here? Finally, I got close enough to get a good look at their shape. They were taking the same route the Superior and I had traveled the other day. Oh, I'm terrified. I froze. Don't say something like you made eye contact with it. The traveler had not seen me, but they were liable to at any moment if they happened to look over their shoulder. Looking back on it, the intelligent choice would have been for me to turn back to the abbey right away, wake the Superior up, and catch Eustace. I was assuming, in whatever duplicitous act she was up to. But perhaps through a mixture of wine and whatever Darcy had given me earlier in the evening, I was not acting intelligently. Well, you'll get this chance to see it, and it will be your last chance, Hedwig, but at least the rest of us will see it too. Not to mention the sheer rush of shock I was feeling at that moment. I followed her. It was not easy. It was cold out, and even in the moonlight, I had to rely on my candle to watch my footing. A strong gust of wind could have extinguished my light, but mercifully, it survived the whole trip. What would I've done if she'd turned around? I can't say for sure. I presume I would have blown the candle out and run straight backwards. Oh? After an agonizingly long walk, we arrived at the hospital. My heart was pounding out of my chest. Is someone gonna take out James? The figure ahead of me broke left, around a back door that the superior and I had taken down to the lower level of the building, so they know of this too. What if it's just the superior? My first impulse was to watch through the small window I had seen at the top of the dungeon, but I realized how obvious that would be if either of them happened to look up. I blew out my candle just to make sure I was invisible. Another part of me wanted to simply tackle the mystery nun on the stairs before she could get to James and demand to know what she was doing out here. But I reasoned it would be likely more useful to hear what they were going to talk about. Were threats going to be made? Would I learn some earth-shattering secret that would illuminate the conspiracy I was working to unfold? I stood as close to the window as I could while still feeling reasonably out of sight. This, frustratingly, made it impossible to see what was happening. I was hopeful that the sound would carry, but they spoke quietly, and the echo made it impossible to discern anything meaningful. I could at least make out the tenor of the conversation was calm. I had been worried that I was about to overhear an intense argument or violent threats, but whatever James and his mystery liaison had to say to each other, it never rose above a dull whisper. That is suspicious. I wanted very badly to take a peek through the little window, but the moonlight was such that anyone passing in front of the opening would be supremely obvious. The conversation grew quieter, and I became worried that they had grown suspicious. Eventually, I made out a sigh of resignation. I suddenly realized that if the conversation came to a close while I was still here, I would have to follow the person I was spying on back to the Abbey as I was now without candlelight. I did not want to further risk being caught following this person. I crept away from the wall I had been pressed up against and then began to sprint back towards the Abbey. Understandable, I would do the same. I hoped, anyway. It was very dark outside. Did she tumble? There was enough moonlight to see the general shape of the ground in front of me, but little else. I ran as hard as I had never ran in my entire life. I was out of breath quickly, and soon after that, I could feel a sharp pinching pain in my side. I stopped every now and then to collect myself, making sure not to change direction on accident. I didn't even know if I had started running in the right direction. I just knew that the further adjustment would surely result in disaster. I had never run like this before, and it was making me aware of muscles and bones I had never realized existed. My inner thighs felt stretched and ready to snap. My chest grew tight. Whenever I pushed myself particularly hard, that pinching pain returned harder, and with a pulsing rhythm I could feel under my skin, as if lute strings inside me were being plucked. Bodies are truly disgusting things, aren't they? Miraculously, it seemed I had aimed true. I could see the Abbey walls ahead of me. I had veered a little somewhere along the route, but not as significantly as I had feared. I slowed my sprint to a canter, and then eventually to a limping walk. I made it through the archway I had walked through earlier, and then my knees gave out. I fell to the ground completely exhausted. I rolled in the grass next to me and attempted to get to my feet, but I was spent. I retched a few times. Groaning, I made it up to all fours. Black bile spilled out of my mouth into the grass with another heave. I realized that it was mostly wine I was expelling, sore and sickly. I was truly pathetic to behold. I could feel my body giving up. I struggled to remain awake. I couldn't just pass out here, but... Oh? Katherine? Hedwig, what are you doing out here? I scrambled to my feet. Katherine was standing in the archway, looking concerned. Well, hold on a minute, I just realized, but... I know, Hedwig said James to Katherine, but does Katherine know who James is? Do they not know him as like the stable boy? Maybe I'm thinking too much into this, but Katherine is kind of suspicious too. Oh, I couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk around the abbey. Must have pushed myself too hard. Goodness, do you need any help? She was smiling, but she looked rather peculiar. She held her hands behind her back, a rigid pose I had never seen her stand in before. No, thank you though. I see. Well, have a good night. So it's still night? Katherine? What were you doing? The same thing you were, of course. I can never sleep after a night of Misericorde drama. What did you and James talk about? What? I felt a surge of bravery. We were alone and it was the middle of the night. That makes it even worse. She could not weasel out of this one. I don't know what you're talking about. Katherine, please. She sighed deeply. Listen, you must promise not to tell anyone about this. How do you know about James anyway? I asked the superior to introduce us. Since I was replacing Katherine II as chronicler, I wanted to know what I was stepping into. He told me he didn't kill her, and then he told me you could vouch for him. We stood in silence for a moment. And you believe him? I do. And what do you stand to gain from helping him, exactly? It just seems like the right thing to do. I wouldn't want to occupy a position I had lingering questions about. Katherine nodded, looking less confident than I had ever seen her. Very well. I can certainly tell you he did not kill her. Really? How? He mentioned something about his tunic. What did he tell you? That was more or less the whole of it. I was trying to ask you for details in a Misericorde. Well, I know he was not wearing a tunic when Katherine II was found. How? Because he was with me. Don't tell me James is like her lover or something. And he didn't slip away? No. I'm quite sure of that. Where were you? In my dormitory room. Really? Why, Hedwig? Hedwig, this is humiliating enough. Please don't make me say it. What? I'm confused. Oh my goodness. This would be precious if I didn't feel so... well, mortified. All I could offer her in response was a blank expression. Hedwig, James and I we had a relationship. I knew it! I knew it! Well, I only knew it in like the last couple of minutes, but... a physical relationship. Hedwig. I know he did not kill Katherine because we had been fucking. Is that conclusive enough for you? Is that what you wanted to hear? Hedwig, are you? My energy had finally dried up completely. My knees gave way. I saw a smear of stars and then... black. Oh goodness, poor Hedwig. Hedwig? Hedwig. Huh? There she is. Thank goodness. Thank you for your assistance, Moira. What happened? I was on a walk to the privy and found you passed out on the path. Huh? Wait, no. Oh dear. She's still delirious. I'm beginning to worry the thin mountain air isn't very good for her. Do we have any dried fruit around here? Yes. One moment. I was lying on the floor in the superior's office. Moira and Katherine were standing above me, both looking concerned. Moira most especially. Katherine's concerns, it seemed, went beyond my well-being. Do you remember what happened before you fainted, Hedwig? Katherine and I were talking and... No, that was after I found you. Moira, I'm quite worried about this. The superior returned with a small wooden bowl. Moira plucked a small dried berry from it and crouched down to feed it to me. Something sweet might help, at least. So you were on a walk, Hedwig? You looked exhausted. Yes, I was unable to sleep. Sleep deprived, of course. That explains the confusion. Yes, it would. Thank God you went to the privy when you did, Katherine. I don't particularly love that phrasing, but yes. The berry Moira had given me was definitely sweet and delicious, although I wasn't really sure how that helped. Nonetheless, I was lucid enough to understand that Katherine was signaling to me that the information that she had shared with me was not something she wanted to discuss in front of Moira and the superior. Begrudgingly, I played along. Yes, I remember now. I was restless after what happened in the Misericorde and went for a walk to clear my head. I think I probably had too much to drink. Oh dear. What happened in the Misericorde? Nothing you need to worry yourself with, Superior. Just our typical womanly exploits. Hehehe. The Superior sighed but did not push the subject. Well, thank you, Katherine, at any rate. God only knows what could have happened to poor Hedwig if you hadn't found her. And thank you, Moira, for being on hand to help her. I was on my way to the privy as well when Katherine found me. What luck! Ugh, a strange but welcome miracle. Well, I see no reason for you all to be crowding my floor at this late hour. Off to bed with you, all of you. Of course. I was pulled to my feet by my would-be saviors and guided towards the door. Oh, and Hedwig, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate you checking in tomorrow after service, just so I can confirm that you're well. Yes, Superior. Once through the door, I was able to move with my own strength. I was sore all over, but I could walk, at the very least. The three of us walked in silence through the cloister towards the stairs to the dorms. Moira let out a lilting chuckle at one point, and I could hear Katherine exhale warily through her nose. I had half a mind to slap Katherine the way I had Eustace. My Hedwig, she's awfully violent. I was not sure I could ever look at her the same way again. Why? Just because? I felt ashamed to be protecting her dirty little secret for her, and even more ashamed that I had seemingly instinctually agreed to do so. What was this place turning me into? I realized I was still carrying the pricket looped around one of my fingers. I was stretched so thin I had not thought about it the whole walk back. I placed it back on the mantel when we arrived at the dormitory. Well, good night. Good night, Moira. Yes, good night, you two. And thank you. We were all speaking in low whispers so as to not wake anyone else. Don't mention it, silly. I actually would appreciate it if you truly didn't mention it. If Flora or Margaret hears about this, I'll never hear the end of it. Mention the evidently miraculous conversions of Moira and I's bodily needs. Privy humor is the lowest of the low. Naturally, Flora finds it uproarious. Hehe. We split up and went to our separate doors. Katherine had to open and close hers with great care as it was still creaking terribly. Now, there is definitely a story there about why that door is creaking. I sighed and collapsed face first into my bed. I didn't have the energy to undress, and I was asleep before I hit the pillow. I dreamed of soldiers chasing me with pikes. My. Is that a cat? Is that a cat? Is it not a cat? I can't see it. Could be a bear for all I know. Oh, it kind of looks like a cat. I think it's a cat. I'm gonna end here for today. But, well, now we know why why Angela probably dislikes Katherine. I mean, in the beginning, in the very first episode, no, was it part 2? Well, in any case, in the beginning, when we first met Katherine, Angela was complaining about how Katherine had, something going on in there. She was suspicious, right? And now I guess she was probably just having sex with the stable boy. No, he's not the stable boy. He's the delivery boy, James. But yes, there was that. That was probably it. But then again, you know how James says that Katherine can vouch for him. In a way, that's true. But on the other hand, we can't forget that Katherine is also like a suspicious person, right? She's one of the suspects, and James is also a suspect. So like the both of them, their alibis are a little weak because only each other can vouch for the other. So it's a bit difficult to say. Only if there was someone who could vouch that they had seen Katherine in her dorm room or something. That might be possible, but hold on. We also have to go back and revisit what James said about Katherine. How did he come to meet Katherine, you know? Well, he has his reason to lie, I guess, to protect Katherine, but I don't know. I mean, it's a little sus in this kind of life and death kind of situation where you want to have, you know, the truth on your side. I mean, if you lie about why you met Katherine, what else could you be lying about? There's that going in my head. Suspicious people that could be in this pool, Eustace and Katherine are the two more suspicious people so far. Eustace, especially with her prank that may not even really be a prank. I do think she has some sort of hatred towards Hedwig. I'm not really sure why. But it really could be just something as innocent as feeling betrayed that Hedwig is taking over her beloved Katherine II's position. It could be that, but at the same time, Hedwig was saying that Eustace had to be the one to kill Katherine because the sword is in Eustace's possession. But that's not necessarily true because I believe that, well, you could always steal the key. That's always just gonna be how it is. It can always be stolen. Anyway, there are a lot of other suspicious things happening, but I think I'm excited to see how everything will fall in place. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!